player fatigue and all that kind of stuff. It's not going to happen anymore. But he was overlooked. I think Matthew Johns was selected in front of him, and yeah, he thought this was down to racism, and then he basically left the Dragons. Like I think the story goes, Kurt, that he pretty much just jumped on a plane and went to America. I would love to kind of chat to some of the staff at the Dragons when that happened, how much notice they got, whether he said he was jumping on a plane or whether the next call they got was he was over in the United States and wouldn't be coming back. But like it's been a difficult season for the Dragons already, and that's kind of thrown a huge, like it'd be an understatement to say that threw a spanner into the works for the Dragons. He was a huge part of what the club did in 99. Like the Dragons don't make the grand final without Mundine. I think he had something like 17 tries in that season. But at the same time, he also brought a lot of pressure, a lot of controversy to the Dragons, and I guess more logistically, it meant that Trent Barrett could move from that unfamiliar role of halfback into 5'8". So at the end of the year, it was no surprise that even though the Dragons didn't play finals and had a very up and down year, that Trent Barrett did win the Dally M Player of the Year because he was finally playing in the position that he wanted to. But that Mundine news, that would have, yeah, I think it, as I said at the top of the show, like if NRL 360 was around in the year 2000, they would have been running with that for 4 weeks straight, I reckon.
Yeah, so Anthony Mundine wasn't playing well enough to be picked for Australia. And there was a plan there. From the outside looking in, and I always got to say that, but there was form with Anthony Mundine with this stuff. And it actually started in 1998 with his mate Solomon Haumono at the Canterbury Bulldogs.
Who was at the Dragons in 2000.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. So I'll get to that in a tick. But I think Mundine was positioning himself to get out of the game already. From memory, that he went on the footy show one night and he said a lot of things. And at one point, he did say that he predicted he would become a champion boxer. I think this is when he quit and said, this is what I want to do. And he actually went on to do it. That's fantastic. But his good mate, Haumono, signed with the Dragons for the year 2000, which we just kind of touched on. But in 1998, he was at the Bulldogs, and he wanted out of Belmore. He did not want to be there. And the story goes that he chased Gabrielle Richards, who was a supermodel, to be with his girlfriend, and left the Bulldogs in the middle of the night. And I'll if you can guess where I'm going, another Bulldogs player does this a few years later, who's also best mates with Anthony Mundine. It was actually Anthony Mundine's idea with Haumono, to get him out of his contract. So it was Mundine's idea and said, just jump on a plane, go to England, and the Bulldogs will rip up your contract.
Mm.
And at that time, which is not known as well, because it did blow up in Channel 9 News, it was all over the newspapers in 98 with Haumono at the Bulldogs. But Haumono and Richards weren't really together at that point either. And when Haumono actually got to London and there were Australian journalists already there, ready to take the snaps, ready to take the photos and all that stuff, he didn't even catch up with Richards. He didn't even get to speak to her while he was there. That was Mundine's idea. Mm. And Canterbury caught wind of this and got the story. So when he came back, he thought Canterbury was just going to sack him. And because Canterbury knew the truth, they didn't sack him. They fined him, took some money out of his contract and put him in reserve grade for the rest of the year. So for Mundine to turn around 2 years later and start politicking to get out of his deal, he's not happy, he wants to go into boxing, then to go to America, that sounds pretty familiar. And then his good mate, Sonny Bill Williams, a few years later at Canterbury, what does he do? Mm. He just says, I don't want to play for Canterbury anymore, gets on the last flight out of Sydney and goes over to France to play rugby union. Mm. So, look, that's been done